Thank you. I will talk a little bit more about my passion, my company later, but I am really excited to lead this discussion about how we better engage girls in STEM. So here's a little bit of a roadmap. We'll start first by just talking about the current state of the STEM workforce and how women are placed in it. And then why we should bother closing it, right? Whether this conversation is even relevant or not. A little bit about what we know about girls in STEM. There are some myths that usually stop the conversation too early. So I'm going to start with those and get those out of the way, and then dive into 4 perceptions that girls have that usually move them out of STEM along the pipeline somewhere before they actually get to a career. All right? So first, a little bit about me. That is 12-year-old Abby. And now that I've shared that with you, we're all best friends, and you cannot judge my fashion sense at 12-year-old. But I grew up in Lagos, Nigeria, which is a country in West Africa. And funny enough, you might not think this, but because of that, I had really strong early influences around STEM. Growing up in Nigeria, you really had 4 choices of careers, not because there weren't others, but everything else was pretty much useless. You were either a doctor or a lawyer, engineer, or banker. And that is all the approved career. That's your short list of career paths that you could have. And 3 of those are STEM career paths, right? So lucky for me. But my parents really focused me around medicine. So for the longest time, I wanted to be a pediatric doctor. And I carried that interest probably till about 14 when I moved here and I was getting ready to start high school. And it was time to actually really think about this career. Like, okay, I'm going to be a doctor. And I realized, wait, I don't like blood. This is not really going to work. So that was the end of my medical career. And thankfully, I found technology, or maybe technology found me. Coming to the States was my first real exposure to technology, because at that time in Nigeria, technology wasn't as prolific as it is right now. It's everywhere. But at the time, we had computers, but it was just a thing. It was a box in the corner. When I moved here, as part of my coursework, I had to use Office applications, Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, all those things. And I actually remember one day doing homework and stopping and actually noticing Microsoft Word. The nerd in me got really excited because I thought, this is really creative. Somebody designed this. And I kind of started paying attention to the menus and the colors and the screen. And it just struck me as something really, really creative. And that sparked my interest in figuring out, how do you make this? How do you make something like this? That's how I ended up at Virginia Tech in a computer science degree, pushed through into a career in STEM at a manufacturing company for a really long time until recently. So I come to this from the perspective of someone that came to technology late, even though I had early influences, and also from the perspective of someone that stuck through it, and someone that had a career in it and now has children that, I'm in charge of navigating their careers as females. So now that you know too much about me, maybe, I want to know who we have in the room. Do we have any parents of girls in the room? Show of hands. Okay, perfect. Do we have aunties? Okay. Mentors or educators that influence girls in any way? Okay, good. So most of us have some motivation around this particular topic, which is good. All right, so women, as far as the general labor force, we're doing pretty well. We hold majority of the bachelor's degrees, majority of the master's degrees, and we're pretty much evenly represented when it comes to the workforce. We're about 48%. However, when you zero into the STEM workforce, then you see the disparities. Women are only 25% of that workforce. What's interesting is that number hasn't really grown significantly in the last 2 decades. It's grown 4%. We're pretty much stagnant at this point as far as women in STEM. What's even more interesting is when you dive into that 25% and see where women actually bias their interests. So inside the STEM workforce and the 25% cut that we do have, women steer more towards the physical, social, life sciences aspects of STEM. right? Which is not too much of a surprise. Health-related, physical sciences, but math, engineering, and computer sciences are pretty low as far as participation. So why should we care about this, right? Should we just leave it alone, let it do what it does, and maybe eventually people might be interested, or does it even matter if they're not? Let it just be. There are three reasons why I think we should care. The first is we have a shortage of people with STEM skills. So, for example, the Manufacturing Institute projects that over the next decade, there will be 2 million jobs unfilled because there's just not enough people, and that's just one industry, right? So even if you just wanted the guys to do the job, you just don't have enough guys to do it. So there's a real economic motivation here. Second is the economic advantage of having a STEM job. STEM workers today earn 2/3 more than a non-STEM worker. And we know that women today earn 73 cents to a man's dollar in general. But in STEM, if you're looking at a STEM woman and a non-STEM man, a woman would actually earn a ton more, right? So where women are mostly heads of households, that's a pretty big deal. That goes a long way. And the last is just having diverse perspectives, right? So if STEM is our engine for innovation and we're constantly building things, the people building things for people should represent those people, right? So if you're solving a problem for women, then there should be women in the room. If you're solving a problem for a community, that community should be fully represented in the room, okay? So if we can agree on that. So what do we know about girls in STEM? There are two myths that I want to squash real quick before we get into the 4 perspectives that girls have that turn them off. But first, I'm going to get a little help from some little friends. So Jimmy Fallon is awesome because he does these segments with kids all the time and asks them the funniest questions. And he happened to do one recently that where he asks these kids why men and women are paid differently for the same job. So a little bit of different question, but the answers are just really funny and also reflective of some of the things that we're talking about today. So I'll let you guys watch it.
Men, and this is what they had to say.
Why do you think women get paid less than men for the same jobs?
Girls don't work as hard as the boys.
What are they doing instead of working hard?
Doing other stuff.
Like what kind of other stuff?
Texting and running on the track.
Why do you think that women make less money than men?
I think because they're very underrated, because they can do more, but people expect them to do less.
What kind of more can they do?
Well, a lot of people underestimate them, and they could do so much more. There's jobs that men can't do that women can.
Like what?
Like, they can be an actress if they want.
And a man can't be an actress.
Well, they can do whatever their heart tells them to do.
How come the woman gets paid less?
A woman might, maybe do stuff a little bit wrong, but she still gets paid less.
Why does she do stuff a little bit wrong?
Because maybe she doesn't know those stuff, and maybe they didn't teach her those stuff.
But the guy knows that stuff?
Yes.
For the same jobs. Is this giving you a headache? Why do you think that women make less money than men?
Well, probably because women care about shopping more than work.
And so you think that they're kind of slacking off at work, shopping online, and that's, yeah? Have you ever seen that happen?
No, but I think it.
Why do you think that women make less money than men?
Because men work harder in real estate and other jobs.
How do you know that?
Because my dad's a real estate agent.
Have you ever seen a female real estate agent?
Yes, I've seen a couple.
And you think they don't work as hard?
I think they slouch.
Why do you think women make less money than men for the same jobs?
I don't know, the world's just a messed up place.
There you have it. So funny, but scary, right? These kids are pretty young to have such strong opinions about how women work and women's motivations about work. And if they go unchecked, these are the men and women that go into the workforce, right? And you can start to see where this begins. So the first myth that usually comes up when this conversation starts is, girls are just not interested in STEM, so just leave them alone. Why are you forcing them? They're just not interested. So the Girl Scouts organization did a study of over 800 teen girls about 5 years ago to study their attitudes towards STEM and their influences. And as part of that study, 74% of teen girls rate themselves as somewhat interested to very interested in STEM. 74%. That is a lot of girls saying, I like this, right? What I like about that study was it wasn't just that, are you interested in STEM or not? They went deeper into how do you qualify that particular interest? And you can see at the top, so the first column is what the sentiments were, and then whether they said that they liked STEM and whether they said they didn't. The first couple of things are all around, I like understanding how things work. I like thinking about big problems. I like puzzles. I like solving problems. And then towards the bottom, the things that they didn't like so much, even though they liked them, doing math. Or putting things together, blocks, right? So, you know, how we just give girls Legos and make it pink, and that's supposed to solve everything. Maybe they just don't like putting things together, right? They think it would be fun to do an app. It's interesting that even the people that don't like STEM, 57% of them still think that's fun, right? So overall, there is a general interest in STEM and the fixing and doing of things. The second myth is that girls are just not built for the rigor of STEM. STEM's just hard work and girls are just not built for it. Well, the girls themselves don't think so. 90% of teen girls believe that if they tried really hard at something, they think that they would succeed. Hard work is something that girls really, really identify with. Microsoft did another study and they looked at girls from age 10 to 30, so a huge range. And what's interesting to see is that starting from middle school all the way to actually being a STEM professional, a tech professional, women primarily think they are the hardest working person in the room, always. But not always the smartest person in the room. And it's interesting to see that in the middle and the high school phase, it's about the same. But then when they do enter the STEM workforce, they start giving themselves credit for their smarts, right? It's like, I got here now. Yeah, I am smart. I am the smartest person in the room, but I still am the most hardworking person in the room, right? So women are not scared of hard work. That if it's an issue of can we do the work, yes, we can do it. Right, so those are the first things that usually are like, well, they're not interested and it's just too hard. So we're over that. So let's talk about the 4 perceptions that girls have that truly influence how they decide and where to be in the STEM pipeline and when they fall out. The first one is that STEM is not creative. It just doesn't come off as something that allows them to express creativity. So the girls in the earlier study I mentioned in grades 5 through 12 were asked if they thought people in jobs that were computer scientists or engineers or in math got to be creative at their jobs. And you can see about half think that they get to be creative. And then for the math, it's just like, no, that's just a mental thing. You're not really doing anything fun at that job. Why is this important that a job needs to be creative? Because most girls and most women identify themselves as creatives. It's just a natural part of who they are. So it's very easy to see the conflict where if I think I'm creative and this career doesn't allow for creativity, I'm probably just not interested. It's just not fun, even if it's easy or if it's hard. It just doesn't align with my interest. Well, the reality is that STEM and creativity enable innovation. Innovation really is all about creativity. STEM is just the tool set that makes that happen, right? So how do we tell that story better so that girls understand that? It starts from how we design the learning experiences they have around STEM, right? Today, we focus very much on the thing that they get to build. Let's get in a room and we're gonna create a web page, or we're gonna build some blocks. there is no connection to what's real when you're actually solving a problem, which is that you start by going to your customer or whoever your potential customer is. You do a customer journey map and actually try to understand what's going on. And then you find problems, and then you step back and use creativity to figure out how to use your STEM tools to solve it. We don't do any of that with our girls. And so they lose the entire creative process of solving anything. And we leave them with just, well, you can put these things together and they do stuff, right? And that just doesn't click. It doesn't connect the dots for them. So in that same study, they read a brief description of what these jobs do and some things that they've done, what the roles do. And after hearing the real problems that they solve, their double-digit increase in their thoughts about how creative those jobs are. It didn't take much, right? It really is just as simple as explaining and filling that information gap. I love this quote from this girl talking about her experience in science. In the lower grades, you're doing activities, it's more hands-on, and then all of a sudden we're in middle school and it's books and worksheets, and you've lost her. It's not her favorite subject anymore. Okay. Perception number 2, STEM is not impactful. It doesn't do anything for anyone. The reason why this is important for girls is because when you look at the top 5 reasons or the top 5 things that are important for a girl when she's choosing her career, she's thinking a lot about philanthropic things. She wants to make a difference in the world. She wants to help people. And when you look at the top 10 jobs that girls are interested in pursuing, none of those technology, computer science type jobs are on there because there's no direct connection to I'm actually going to help anybody with this. Medicine, no surprises at the top, and that reflects why in the 25% that we are in the workforce, primarily we're in medicine, right? Because you know that you're going to help someone. Is medicine an easy track? No, that takes forever, a lot of school. But you can stick through it when you know that there's a reason there. So for many girls, engineering and technology career paths just don't seem to align with their own personal goals of doing work that's meaningful. This quote kind of says it all too. It's like, I see teachers, I understand what teachers do, but not everyone my age knows what an engineer does. They really just don't understand what that is, because we're not telling them in the way that they could. The reality, though, is we all know in here that STEM solves real-world problems. So STEM has a lot of impact and makes a lot of difference in our world. So how do we tell that story a little bit differently? We have to rethink how we design making spaces in our learning communities, right? So, for example, there's a lot of movement now with 3D printers, right? So it's like, oh, go in this room, there's a bunch of 3D printers, have fun, make your own toys and all that. That's maybe fun for like 10 minutes, right? You go in, okay, this is how it works. But why am I printing things? What is the purpose of printing things? Why am I printing things with alternative materials, right? So there needs to be a connection to the why, because girls are less likely to be a tinker without cause. There needs to be a reason why I'm doing what I'm doing, right? So simple things like, if we're gonna have a coding camp, could we connect to a nonprofit that needs a website? So we're actually building something for a company that actually needs this, right? And there you start to build that connection to, I'm learning this in order to make a real difference. And this nonprofit is doing this in our community that makes a difference. I'm connected, right? So very simple in how we can just shift our mindset a little bit about how we frame the learning experiences in STEM. Corporations, too, should take the responsibility to share more about their whys. If you exist in a community and you're serving that community, then the kids in that community should have a good understanding of what you do, why you do it, so that if you want them to think about you as a potential employer in the future, that's where it starts, by talking to them directly that way. So in the same way, after hearing about what these career paths actually do as far as solving real-world problems, dramatic increases in their thoughts as to whether or not STEM makes a difference. Out of the workforce, STEM women actually do feel that the work they do makes a difference, a lot more than other women. So the reality is that STEM does solve real world problems. The perception is there because we're not doing enough to connect the dots for girls. So those first two are pretty easy, right? They're perceptions that they're not true. We can do better in telling the right stories. The next couple are a little bit different. Well, the next two. So the next one is that STEM is not inclusive. And what's different about this one is that it is true that STEM is not inclusive. They're right on that. But that's not the only story about STEM and inclusivity. Well, first of all, most girls, when they are asked to think about an engineer, they're going to think about a male. What's interesting is as they get older, so now they're women, 40% of them actually think about male. And then if they actually go into a STEM field, more of them think of male. So we're just kind of validating the fact that, yeah, this is a male-dominated industry, which means that, yes, it's not inclusive. Particularly for women of color and children of color, this is a stronger sentiment because in that study with the Girl Scouts, you hear things like, because I'm female, I feel like I wouldn't be treated equally. More strongly with African American girls and Hispanic girls, they don't feel like employers even want women, right? They feel like they might be an outsider in the workplace or experience sexual harassment, right? So these are all real issues. However, the reality is it's a parallel reality that women are thriving in STEM as well. And we need to tell both stories, right? So we need to tell the story that women are succeeding, women are making an impact, workplaces are becoming more inclusive, but we also need to double up on the work of making it even more inclusive for more girls. So we need to be persistent in showing female representation. It's not enough to just fly someone into a classroom once a year to have a discussion with the girls. It's got to be in their faces. It's got to be in their textbook. It's got to be through case studies. It's got to be in the examples that are used in class about innovations and scientists, on their TV, on their iPad, everywhere that representation matters. And we have to try to figure out how to go beyond the hero roles, right? So there are certain roles that we talk about often. You talk about the doctor, they're the hero. You talk about the coder, they created something. But there are roles surrounding all of these people that are equally important. And STEM and creation is a very collaborative process that involves many people in different roles. For example, because we're doing a tech talk, if you're building software, you've got a coder, you've got a UX designer, you've got a tester. There are several different roles. You've got a project manager. Lots of girls have no idea that those roles exist. And some of those roles better align with their interests, right? So just exposing the diversity inside of STEM allows them to see how inclusive it is. There's room for me there. Oh, I can do that. Oh, I might be a UX designer. I might not be a coder, but that one fits me, right? You start to allow them to think about it in a broader sense. Some success, a little bit of success out there. You guys might have heard about the I Look Like an Engineer hashtag that was going around for a while. And that was great because it allowed people to see different faces of engineers through social media. There is a popular study, it's called the Draw a Scientist study. Basically, they ask kids to draw a scientist. And historically, they draw men. And recently, they did an update to the test, and more we're seeing kids draw more females, which is as testament to more representation in their media, in children's media. Now, what is the impact of if a girl actually has female role models? It's very clear. It's hard to read down there, but I'll read it for you. They feel powerful while doing STEM, a lot more. They feel like they know actually how to pursue a STEM career, and they feel like they understand how relevant STEM is just by having a female role model. So very important to tell both stories that, yeah, there's still some uncomfortable things that happen in STEM workspaces, but STEM workspaces are improving. A majority of women that work in tech, for example, report that their employers make strong efforts to make their workplaces inclusive. I would share the same sentiment. I worked for a manufacturing company for 13 years, and I would say I had a great experience. I would say I would encourage my daughter to work there, and I would expect that she would have a good experience. I would say that particular employer was very interested in inclusivity and did things to make sure that everyone felt safe. And I'm sure there are other companies like that, right? So we've got to get these stories out so that people feel that things are getting better. The last one, and probably the hardest one, is that STEM's easier for boys, which is just this boy thing. And that one's interesting because it starts really early. And if you just think back to the video we watched a little while ago, just how young those kids were and some of the very strong opinions they had. So Megyn Kelly did a segment a little bit, I think it was last year. She sat down with 2 researchers out of New York and some kids and their parents. And they basically took them through this exercise where they had them think through a scenario at a workplace or classroom where someone was really smart in the room. And then they showed them 2 pictures and said, who was that person? And overwhelmingly, somewhere between age 5 and 6, everything goes wrong because the 6-year-olds think that the boys are smarter. The 5-year-olds think the girls are smarter. And so you can kind of speculate. It's about when you start school and you start, navigating the social landscape and see how other people behave. And maybe that's an influence. But somewhere around age 6 is where girls start to doubt their own intelligence. And then it doesn't stop. Right? So through elementary school, 23% of girls are not sure that they're smart enough for their dream job. And then it goes into middle school at 32%. By the time they get to high school, we're at half, 1 in 2 women feeling like, I don't know if I'm smart enough for the job that I want, right? So why is that important? Well, the reality is that STEM is actually just hard. It's hard for everybody. It's not easier for boys, although in some ways, boys are better encouraged, right? So anybody think back on calculus fondly. Is that like the best time of your life? Probably not. Probably with a little bit of PTSD and trauma of how crazy and hard it was, right? Well, this study mapped beginning at freshman year in college and moving through calculus 1 and 2, and then people that actually stuck it through and graduated and then entered into the workforce and just kind of tracked how people dropped out. Well, the first thing to notice is, so the men are the blue line, the women are the red line. The first thing to notice is both of them drop out. It's just hard. At some point, somebody is like, this is not worth it, I'm done, right? But the difference is girls are dropping out at a much higher rate than boys are. And so they projected that if women persisted at the same rate that men did through calculus 1 and all the way through graduation, women today would make up 37% of the STEM workforce rather than 25%, which is a huge gap, right? So calculus is kind of this gateway course, right? It's like you make it through and you're good or you don't, right? But if you think about what we've talked about already, if it's not creative and I don't even know if it's really impactful, and I hear that it's not really inclusive and now you want me to get through calculus, no, bye, I'm done, right? So it just kind of builds on top of each other. But there's something else at work here that's really interesting. Reshma Sanjani runs Girls Who Code. She's really awesome and had this great TED talk about teaching girls bravery instead of perfection. And the premise behind it is we encourage boys to take risks, and we don't do the same for girls. There's a psychologist that breaks it down even in an interesting way. It was really interesting to me as a parent because what she basically says is when kids are younger, girls, they master self-control much earlier, right? So in preschool and kindergarten, they sit down, listen, they listen. Boys are a little bit more of a handful. So the feedback that you naturally give a girl is, you're so good, good job, you're smart, you're such a smart girl, keep doing what you're doing. And then the boy, it's like, if you could just sit down, you would get this. If you could just focus, you would get it. The message that the boy hears is, I'm in control of my destiny. If I just did this, I could do that. And so they get to foster this growth mindset of, well, I could be smarter. If I worked hard, I would get it. If I'm not getting something, it's because I'm not working hard. What it does on the flip side for girls is because it's like this, I was naturally perfect and talented, and I was praised for that. It freezes the mind so that you think, if it's hard, it must not be natural. I'm working really hard at this, maybe it's not my thing. Maybe that's just not what I'm naturally good at. And it makes girls think that their abilities are innate, it's stuck, it can't grow. Right? So this is where the village comes in around the girl. The power of the people around the girl that can encourage and help her push through and help her realize that this is just a difficult thing, but you're up to it. We've already talked about hard work is not a big deal, right? The girls are not scared of hard work, right? But once you connect the dots that, oh, it's just hard, I just need to work through this, okay. And there's reason to, fine, then we can move on. So it's really important to create STEM advocates in schools and at home so that teachers are encouraging girls in the right way, and parents are also doing the same. Enrichment outside of the school is really important because we all know, we just talked about STEM having to be hands-on, and our schools are strapped for resources, right? So for example, from K through 3, kids get 68 minutes of instruction in language arts to 18 minutes of science, right? So overwhelmingly, it's so much easier to teach English in language in schools versus the science. So if you're not enriching their education outside of the classroom, they're likely not getting what they need to really push through and be encouraged through STEM. Who thinks that moms versus dads are the encouragers? Who thinks it's the dads that encourage the most towards STEM? You do? Just one person? No confidence in our dads here. Okay. Well, you're right. Moms, the rest of you are right. Moms are the primary encouragers, followed by teachers and then dads, which is kind of an irony, right? It's like you've got all these men in STEM, and then they've got these daughters, and they're not actually encouraging them to move into STEM. Not really sure what's going on there, but really a call to action for all the men in the room, that your role is really influential. One, you might have more context than a mom would as to what the real world applications for STEM are. You can share that. You can share what you're doing at work, right? Those are easy things. When a girl does have the support of a parent and a teacher, the results are explosive. So girls that have that support combined say that they are more likely to continue computer science in high school and college. They are more likely to continue technology in high school and college. They're also less likely to feel embarrassed to ask questions in class because they've done things outside of classroom that makes them feel comfortable, and they're more likely to choose the subjects in school like AP courses that are going to get them down a STEM path. So that's just 4 big perceptions that really get in the way of girls in STEM. So key takeaway, if you don't remember anything, the first is girls are not in STEM for the lack of interest. They are interested. In fact, because they are natural creatives, they lean to that kind of work. How can we create things? How can we make a difference? But what we have to do to make sure that young girls get it is connect the dots to real world problem solving, make their learning more realistic, spread it out. Let's not just talk about what they're building. Let's spread it out to the actual process of solving a problem so that they can be a part of it all. Make role models more visible and empower her to stick through it because it's worth it in the end. So a little bit about my company. I left Ingersoll Rand recently to start Smart Girls HQ, which is focused on increasing female participation in the STEM pipeline from K through 12. And my passion is really around helping you guys that are in the village, right? So we throw a lot of products at the kids and they're not buying it. They don't have the money, or they're not the ones making the choices. But we also assume that parents know exactly what to do. We assume that educators know what to do, and we also assume that corporations know how to do these things, right? So my focus is on helping the support system around the girl with the resources that they need in order to exact their influence. So our big launch is for our parenting platform, RaisingSmartGirls.com launches September 1st. So if you are a parent, I would love for you to check it out. It will be basically Parents Magazine meets Education.com for the audience of parents of girls. We're going to be focused on how do we build competence, confidence, and character, and connect the dots like we just talked about. And our goal is ultimately to get it to a point where it's a personalized service using artificial intelligence to basically match a girl's interest with the STEM resources around her. So we take the work away from you and you just get just-in-time recommendations and make it super easy for you to execute, actually, the engagement with your daughter. The last thing we're doing is we're designing local STEM experiences in Charlotte that are going to basically use the principles we just talked about. Are we connecting it to their interests? Are we connecting it to real life problems to be solved within our community? And are we connecting it to actual jobs? What does it look like when I graduate if I want to continue doing this job? So if you are particularly interested in this work, if you are a parent, feel free to reach out in any of the places. I'll be happy to chat, coffee, but let's connect. Okay, thank you.